Have you ever wondered if an underwater scene can be both interactive and clean and simple? Well, that's exactly what we are creating today. In today's video, I'll be bringing some deep blue underwater goodness to life with a clean and simple shaker card featuring beautiful corals, playful little fish, and sparkling sequences that mimic bubbles beneath the ocean waves. This project is part of the Altenew's video hop celebrating the theme Something Blue. Be sure to check out the entire hop for plenty of creative inspiration from talented designers who have each shared their own unique take on this blue theme. And don't forget about the giveaway. Altenew is offering prizes, and all you need to do for a chance to win is leave a comment on each video in the hotline. I'll have all the details linked in the description box below. Now, let's dive right in and start creating. I'll be using two new products from the June release for today's card. Now the first one is the coral arch die set, which we will use to create the focal point of our shaker window, and for the background inside the shaker, I'll be using the undersea jambori stencil. Now I'll begin by working on the window using this beautiful coral arch die set. This set features two dies, and the window itself, it's a 2-inch arch that cuts beautiful coral and seaweed details, making it incredibly versatile. It works wonderfully just as a focal point or a background element, or as we are doing today, a decorative shaker window. Now the set also includes 3 little fish dies that are perfect for completing your underwater scene. They add a sense of movement and bring that extra life and personality to any ocean-inspired projects. To begin, I am positioning the arch window right in the center of a white cardstock panel. This panel measures 4 by 5 1/4 inches, making it slightly smaller than a standard A2 size cut front. Now to help with the placement, I used a T-square ruler to align the die as accurately as possible and made sure everything was nice and straight before committing to the cutting. Now once I was happy with the positioning, I secured the die in place with a bit of a washi tape and ran the entire assembly through my die cutting machine. I absolutely love the delicate, intricate details this die creates. The coral and seaweed elements cut beautifully and adds so much more interest to the design. If you're using a thicker cardstock and notice that some of the finer details don't cut all the way through, an easy fix is to add an extra piece of cardstock as a shim. That little bit of extra pressure can make all the difference when die cutting intricate dies or designs like this one. Now once the panel was cut, I used my pokey tool to remove any of that small leftover pieces from the die cut openings. This only takes a minute and really helps bring out all those gorgeous details in the design. Before I start working on the shaker window and all the decorative elements, I always like to stamp my sentiment first. It's one of those little habits that has saved me more than once. Now, if I don't like the placement or something goes wrong during stamping, I can simply grab a fresh panel and start over without having invested too much time into the project. Now, for this card, I chose a sentiment that says "Sending Oceans of Love" from the Craft Your Life project kit Coral Reef Wonders. I thought it was perfect. It was a perfect complement to our underwater theme and tied the entire design together beautifully. I stamped the sentiment using a black pigment ink and then added a layer of clear embossing powder. Once heat set, it creates a beautiful glossy finish that adds just a touch of shine and elegance while still maintaining the clean and simple look of the card. With the sentiment in place, it was time to bring in some beautiful shades of blue and start adding color to our arch die cut. Now, since the theme of this hop is something blue, I really wanted the color palette to be the star of the show. An underwater scene naturally lends itself to blue, and I thought an ombre blend would be the perfect way to add depth and visual interest to this otherwise intricate design. To create that gradual transition of color, I selected a few shades of blue ranging from the lightest to the darkest. I started with ocean waves, then moved into dusk, and then deepened the blend with Persian blue. Working from one shade to the next allowed me to create a smooth gradient that flows beautifully across this delicate die cut. The ultra sticky mat holds the die cut in place while I add this beautiful ink blending. Now, one of the things I love about ink blending on detailed die cuts like this one is how the color naturally highlights all of the texture and dimension. As the different shades settle into the intricate coral and seaweed details, they really help define the design and bring those delicate elements to life. As I continued blending, I felt that the piece could use a little more contrast near the bottom. So I reached out for an even darker shade that I had in my stash, and that one's called Riding the Wave. Adding the deeper color at the base helped ground the design and create an illusion of depth, almost like looking into the darker waters of the ocean floor. By the time I was finished, I absolutely loved how this ombre color scheme turned out. The transition from lighter blues to the rich, deep navy tones added so much movement and dimension to the die cut, which perfectly captured the feel of an underwater scene. It's a simple technique, but it makes such a big impact on our finished card. Now that we have our main focal point and sentiments ready, we have completed all of the major elements that will be featured on the front of our shaker. With those pieces aside, it's time to focus on what will sit behind the window and really bring this underwater scene to life. For the background inside the shaker window, I wanted something with a soft ink blending, but also wanted to add plenty of texture and detail. Rather than using a simple blended panel, I decided to pull out the Undersea Jamboree stencil. Now, this one's a 3-layer stencil set that creates a beautiful underwater scene filled with corals, seaweeds, and adorable little fishes. It's a perfect backdrop for our shaker window because it adds interest without overwhelming the focal point. I started with a white cardstock panel that was slightly larger than the window opening. This gives me plenty of room to position everything later while ensuring that no white edges peek through around the shaker window. For the first layer of the stencil, which is mainly adding the seaweed elements, I wanted to introduce something bright, fresh color to contrast against the blue that we used in the arch die set. To achieve that look, I blended together fresh leaf and reindeer moss inks. The combination creates a vibrant green with just enough depth and variation to feel that natural while still maintaining that bright, playful underwater vibe. As I worked through the stencil, I focused on creating a smooth blend between the two shades, allowing some of the lighter green to peek through while adding darker greens for dimension. Even with just this layer in place, you can already start to see the underwater scene taking shape, and those beautiful seaweed details immediately add movement and life to the background. Moving on to the stencil layer number 2, I started by adding some of the fishes and the coral details that will be visible through the shaker window. Now this layer is where the underwater scene really begins to come together, adding those fun little elements that help tell a story and create interest behind the focal point element. Now for the fishes, I wanted a color that would stand out against the greens and blues while still coordinating with the overall palette. So I chose Deep Iris, which is a beautiful, cheerful purple that adds a nice pop of contrast without feeling out of place. The purple fish bring a playful touch to the design and immediately draw the eye. For the coral elements, I reached for Potion Blue, the same shade I used earlier on the arch die cut. Repeating colors throughout a design is one of my favorite ways to create a cohesive look, and using the same blue helps tie the background and the focal point together seamlessly. Finally, I moved on to stencil number 3, which adds those tiny bubble details throughout the scene. Since I wanted the bubbles to remain subtle and airy, I used Ocean Waves, which was the lightest shade of blue in the color palette. The soft blue ink creates just enough contrast to make the bubbles visible while keeping them delicate and understated. Once all the 3 stencil layers were complete, I had a beautiful underwater background filled with seaweed, coral, fishes, and bubbles. The combination of greens, blues, and pops of purple creates a fun ocean-inspired scene that adds plenty of interest behind the shaker window while still allowing the focal point to remain the star of the card. To turn this into a shaker card, the next step is to cover the window opening with a piece of clear acetate. This will create the transparent barrier that keeps all of our shaker elements securely inside while still allowing that beautiful underwater scene to show through. I started by adding strips of double-sided tape along the back of the window opening. Now, whenever I'm working with acetate, I almost always reach out for tape instead of liquid glue. Over the years, I found that tape provides a much cleaner and more reliable bond for slick surfaces like acetate or plastic. Liquid glue can sometimes slide around before it dries, and in some cases, it may seep along the edges, leaving visible marks on the acetate. Since acetate is completely transparent, even the smallest smudge can be noticeable on the finished project. Using double-sided tape eliminates that problem entirely. It creates an instant bond, keeps everything neatly in place, and gives a clean professional finish with no drying time required. Once the tape was in place, I simply adhered the acetate sheet over the window opening, making sure it was completely covered and securely attached before moving on to the shaker assembly. Next, I built up my shaker well by adding foam tape around the back of the window. I made sure to keep the foam tape placed very close to the edges of the window opening so that there are no gaps and the shaker elements could slip behind the frame when the card is tilted or held upright. This step really is important because it creates that raised barrier that holds everything in place and gives the shaker its proper depth. Now, before I could remove the backing, I attached my ink-blended coral arch onto the acetate layer. To adhere the die cut piece, I used just a few small dots of liquid glue. The key here is to use minimal amount, just enough to hold the die cut in place without overdoing it. If too much of that glue is applied, it can easily seep through the delicate openings in the die cut, and that'll affect that clean finish of your design. Using the light touch ensures that everything stays secure while still preserving all that intricate detail and keeping the final look clean, crisp, and professional. You could also use spray adhesives, but I find liquid glue a lot more easy to work with, especially for intricate die cuts like these. I will carefully place the arch window in place and then move on to the next step. Once my arch window was in place, I noticed there was an opportunity to reinforce the structure just a little bit more. To ensure that none of the shaker sequence or elements would slip into any unintended spaces, I decided to add a thin extra strip of foam tape behind the window opening. This additional layer acts as a safety barrier essentially around any detailed or intricate areas of the die cut, making sure everything stays nicely contained within the shaker well when the card is tilted or moved. After that, I continued adding foam tape around the entire perimeter of the panel. This step not only secures the structure but also gives the card a solid, even backing. It helps create a well-defined shaker space and ensures that the final assembly feels sturdy and well supported once everything is sealed together. Before adding in the shaker elements, I always like to treat the inside edges of the foam tape with a bit of anti-static powder. This is a small but really important step that helps ensure that our sequences in the shaker bits don't cling to the sides of the foam tape once everything is sealed. This creates a slight barrier that reduces static and friction inside the shaker well, allowing the sequence to move freely and flow beautifully. Keeping the blue theme in mind, I reached out for a beautiful shimmering sequin mix. This is the Shimmering Pool Stellar Sequences. Now I stuck to size number 2 and 4 to fill in my shaker window because this is a comparatively smaller window space. Now these smaller sizes will help create a lot more movement. So when the card is tilted, the sequence casts the light differently as compared to how it would to those larger sequences in a small window. Now, another helpful tip that I always follow is before adding the shaker elements, I first remove the backing from the foam tape only when I'm ready to close the window. This simple step helps reduce static and minimizes the chance of the sequences sticking to the exposed adhesive edges. Once all the backing is removed, I carefully poured the sequin mix inside the window, making sure they were evenly distributed across the window so the movement feels balanced and visually pleasing. Now, before sealing the shaker window with that beautifully stenciled background panel, I took a moment to gently wiggle this card front. This helps the sequins settle evenly and ensures that they lie flat within the shaker well, giving a balanced distribution once the card is finished. Then I placed my stenciled background panel over the foam tape to close the window. I aligned it slowly and precisely so that everything matched up perfectly. After placing it down, I pressed it firmly along all the edges, making sure I seal it completely. And well, I absolutely love how this turned out. The movement, the colors, the underwater scene all came together so beautifully in the shaker design. I went ahead and adhered this panel on top of a top folding A2 size card base. I chose a crisp white card base to maintain that clean and simple aesthetic and let the underwater colors really shine. However, you could easily switch things up and use a blue card base as well to echo the tones used in the coral arch and create more of a monochromatic look. Well, once my card base was secured, you remember the three little leaves that were included in the die set? Well, I didn't want to leave them out, so I die cut them from white cardstock and I added soft touches of yellow and orange to each of those. This small bit of coloring helps bring them to life and gives them a playful sunny contrast against the cool blue background. That little pop of warm color really stands out in the finished card design and adds just the right amount of brightness to balance all the ocean inspired tones. I then went ahead and added the three little fishes directly onto the coral arch window. Placing them around the design helps guide the eye across the focal point and add that extra sense of movement, almost as if they are swimming through the underwater scene. For a final finishing touch, I brought in a few more of those same shimmering pool stellar sequin mix and scattered them lightly on either side of the window. This subtle addition ties everything together and enhances the shimmer and sparkle without overpowering the design. And with that final detail in place, the card is complete. The layers, textures, and soft movement all come together to create a clean and simple underwater shaker scene that feels both playful and elegant. And that brings this card project to a close. I absolutely love how this turned out, especially with a beautiful something blue theme running through every layer. Now, from the soft ombre coral arch to that ink blended underwater background and those sparkling sequences that bring everything to life. There's something so calming and magical about working with different shades of blue, and I hope this project inspires you to explore your own ocean inspired creations as well. Don't forget, this project is part of the Altenew's video hop, so make sure you hop along, follow all the designers, and leave a comment on each video for a chance to be entered into the giveaway. All the details and the links will be in the description box below, along with links to all the supplies that I used to create this card. Please note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.